employers, social media or not, can't see somebody who walks in, pregnant into a job interview. It's like, I really don't want to have that first 6 months of that person's job where they're not working here. That's employment discrimination, right? That same concept applies to what happens online. Employers have to be able to draw a straight line between an employee's behavior, a candidate's behavior, and the impact that that behavior would have in the workplace, right? So, for example, somebody saying something homophobic or intolerant about other people would be a problem if you have people of all different stripes who work, within your organization, right?
Welcome to Don't Tell Me About Yourself, the podcast where old school hiring meets a modern reality check. I'm Lorna Erickson. And I'm Victoria Gates, and we're the co-founders of Expert Interviewers.
Between the two of us, we've got 40 years of hiring experience. We've studied interviewing techniques. We've trained thousands of people globally to stop making the same mistakes over and over again.
And we've got 340,000 people following us online because apparently everyone has a story about a bad interview. You know the ones. The illegal questions, the 45-minute monologues, showing up late with no apology.
So every week, we're tackling the biggest subjects in hiring.
We bring real stories, real data, and real talk about how to make interviews actually work for everyone.
Because great hiring isn't luck, it's a practice skill. So whether you hire, apply, or just love a good interview train wreck, the show is for you. Welcome back to the Don't Tell Me About Yourself podcast. Today, we're joined by Ben Mones, founder and CEO of Fama Technologies. Fama works in one of the most complex areas of hiring right now, helping companies understand public digital behavior and the potential risks it can signal. At a time when AI and hiring is under scrutiny, privacy conversations are louder than ever, and workplace safety concerns are real, Ben is building a company right at the intersection of all of those tensions. So today, we're talking about what it actually means to evaluate digital behavior in hiring and what responsibility comes with building technology that can influence someone's career. Ben, welcome to the show.
Woo!
What's up? Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
We're so happy to have you here. We get to expand on a conversation that we started with you at HR Tech a little while ago. Our conversation, it really stuck with us, so we're excited to share more about you and your company with our listeners. Can you just start off and just tell us, what did you do prior to starting Fama?
Yeah, I've been in enterprise software pretty much for my whole career prior. So, got out of college and jumped right into tech, both in New York, San Francisco. I'd say kind of the steel thread for me across my career was helping companies do more with less using software. I kind of came into the market right when the cloud was taken off, which was like a great time to be in technology. So yeah, I'm a reformed tech bro. That's what I would say.
That is awesome.
Put that on your tombstone. I love that.
Literally. It's tattooed on my neck right here.
Oh, perfect.
We put a lot of tattoos on our foreheads in our podcast.
Yes,
We've noticed
we do.
that. So,
Cool.
yeah, why not? We're going to have to go down to the neck soon. Can you tell us what were some problems that you were obsessed with before Fama existed?
I'd say the biggest problem was trying to figure out what I was, going to make me happy and where I was going to get my drive from. And I'd always been a kind of very entrepreneurial guy. I'd had lemonade stands, of course, when I was younger, but had my own barbecue business when I was in college, right? And so I'd always thought I was like smarter than everybody. Then I would work for it. But starting a company, that's not so hard. I could just go do that. And then it's really hard and it's really difficult, as you guys know. So, yeah, I'd say the problems I was obsessed with was just more of this like self-exploration and path of trying to figure out what was going to make me happy and where I could apply, the skills that I had to, make me hungry for more and also engaged in my day to day. That was probably the biggest problem I was thinking about.
Dude.
I have to know, though, because you can't throw barbecue out. You can't throw barbecue business out without getting a question.
You want to
What
go
was
down?
like, what was your anchor product? Like, what was the main item on the menu? I must
We
know.
might have to do another podcast for this one then. So my dad is the 1977 North Carolina pork cooking champion. And if you're into barbecue, you know that that's like a big deal. His tagline that became mine was like, "We're the only Jews who do whole hog barbecue." So we had pig roast growing up. We'd roast whole pigs, have the whole neighborhood come through, and super fun thing from when I was a kid up until a teenager. And yeah, when I got to college at Vanderbilt in Nashville, it was like a very, barbecue is a real thing down there too. A little bit different than how they think about it in North Carolina, but yeah, started my own like whole hog barbecue business. We would roast whole pigs. That's what we would do.
That is
That was my flagship.
That is amazing. I will say I've been to a pig
Mhm.
roast before and they're incredible. My best friend in high school, her graduation party for high school was a pig roast. So I know I've experienced the joy of what you're saying, but wow. Okay, cool. Sorry. I totally got sidetracked when you said that. I'm like, I must know more.
Yeah.
You're multifaceted, Ben.
Our Kansas City listeners where I sit are going to be like drooling. This is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Kansas City has some amazing, I think actually some of the best barbecue in the country. But, North Carolina, they
Mm.
call any type of, pork, it's mostly like shredded pork, that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm a whole hog barbecue guy. So that's my thing. Best
Love
brisket
it.
in Texas, though. Best brisket in Texas.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that gets us like up to fama. Like that takes us like right barbecue. Dad is king of barbecue is what I'm hearing. And
Yeah.
then you had some interest in solving some problems and helping people do more with less. But we know a lot about FAMA. But can you just explain, like for those that aren't familiar, just what does FAMA do and analyze?
Yeah, we're a talent screening company. So we really help at that sort of phase when companies are evaluating maybe one or that finalist, 2 to 3 people for a particular position. What we do is bring in the dimension of who folks are in text, image, and video, how they show up online so that employers can use that information in that talent screening process, right? So we come into the market basically with the perspective that half of the workforce today is Gen Z and millennial. And like myself, we've grown up with social media, right? We've had social media since 2004, when I was getting to college, right? And so, one of these things I think that we've sort of targeted the market with is saying that employers have long cared about evaluating behaviors like whether or not someone's going to act intolerant towards others. Right? I'm talking about the basics, things like evangelizing illegal drug use, right, or acting harassing, threatening, the sorts of no-go items that appear in your code of conduct, employee handbook, et cetera. For today's workforce, a lot of those signals live online, and in simple terms, we provide the tools for employers to leverage that in a privacy first and globally compliant way.
That makes,
Interesting.
yeah.
That is so fascinating. When people hear this, they're going to have a lot of questions. And I think one question we want to start with is what do people assume you're doing that you're not?
Yeah, great question. I would say in this world of like rightly so, right? Like the history of everything from like Facebook and using, games like the Cambridge Analytica scandal to steal our personal data, sell it to
Sure.
advertisers, right? There's a lot of healthy skepticism around how you should or shouldn't leverage what we do online, how we do it, from mass surveillance of the government to private corporations like Meta, getting your gaming to sell it to an advertiser or something like that. But really, I would say what, people sort of think that we do that we don't do is they go really quickly to the edge cases, right? They're like, oh, like you guys are going to look at whether someone voted for Trump or Harris, right? You're going to look at whether or not I agree or disagree with the conflict in Israel, right? These sort of like topics and issues that you don't bring up at the dinner table, certainly that don't come up in the workplace and justifiably don't have a role in the workplace, right? Politics, religion, dinner table work, it's the same, sort of thing. So yeah, the biggest misconception I think is that we're kind of like in these gray areas and in these kind
Mhm.
of salacious, they have a lot of gravity in terms of talking points. People like talking about them. They generate those topics, a lot of engagement on social media. Sometimes it can feel like our social media is just like this highly polar one side or the other on hot button or hot topic issues. But
Yeah.
customers use us on the basics. That's what we always talk about, right? It's like, let's get back to the basics. Let's talk about the things that we all care about that sit in every single, employer's employee handbook or code of conduct, code of ethics. And that's some of the issues we talked about, right? Like harassment, intolerance, threats, et cetera. So once we kind of bring folks back to, yeah, we know you think we're like 1984 Big Brother. We're not, what we're doing is really looking at the things that you already care about, but those risks, the signals of that risk manifest and appear in different ways for today's workforce.
So I hear you. It's going back to figuring out alignment between people's behaviors and what would be in a typical employee handbook. Do you ever have companies that do push for more, that are saying, I'm just not going to like one of those polarizing subjects that you just talked about? Like, are companies pushing for more, or do you help to draw the line?
Yeah, I would say by and large, from all of this is highly regulated, right? Tools
Yeah.
and technology that you use when you're hiring somebody, the information that you base a hiring decision on is largely regulated under the FTC or in specifics, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, right? Of making sure
True.
that just like people were using credit or background check investigations as a proxy for whether or not they hire someone, there are guardrails that are put in place, right? In other words, like employers, social media or not, can't see somebody who walks in, pregnant into a job interview. It's like, you know what? Like, I really don't want to have that first 6 months of that person's job where they're not working here. That's employment discrimination, right? That same
Yeah.
concept applies to what happens online. So employers, I would say by and large, know that they have to be able to draw a straight line between an employee's behavior, a candidate's behavior, and the impact that that behavior would have in the workplace, right? So, for example, somebody saying something homophobic or intolerant about other people would be a problem if you have people of all different stripes who work within your organization, right? And so we've had some scenarios over the years, but they've actually been like outside of the United States. Like we've had some like Chinese affiliated companies come to us, or Turkish affiliated companies come to us that have wanted to do things that are a little bit outside the bounds of, corporate ethics, I would say. It's certainly who we are as a company. But in the States, most people know like there are certain things you can and can't do when it
Yeah.
comes to
Yeah.
criteria to evaluate as part of a hiring decision.
Yes, you're kind of mentioning that there's like guardrails that exist currently out there, whether that be governmental agencies or other things that keep it. But I'm curious, like within your company or within your handbook, I guess, like what guardrails or things did you put in place early when you decided to get into this space? Because I'm sure you had to make some decisions on your own too.
Yeah, 100%. Like part of the question I think a lot of tech companies go through this is like, how much do you want to go for revenue at all costs and screw it how it kind of shows up, right? I think we've seen a lot of companies who've pursued that growth at all costs initiative and failed versus that kind of like, I'm not going to call it patient building, but really thinking about creating long-term enterprise value in the marketplace and trying to anticipate like where the wind is blowing on some of what are business users going to think about the privacy decisions we make, the consumer first decisions that we make, right? That's kind of a lot of the iteration and planning through we went through in the early days. Was not just like what's legal, but we started this company before the GDPR was even a thing. GDPR, was announced in 2016. We started the company in 2015, right? And enforced in 18, GDPR, just as one example. But we had to really think critically and carefully about, did we want compliance to be a differentiator for us, right? Like, did we want to go the extra step? Did we want to hire employment counsel early? Did we want to put privacy by design as a feature within our product? And
Mhm.
the answer there was yes. And that did mean that we spent a lot of money on legal bills and legal fees, like much more than any other startup at that time would. But like, I'll give you an example. Like when I was whiteboarding kind of the product and designing it, I still have some of like the old drawings of when we came up and began prototyping and even putting the patent together, for the product we have today. I actually got in touch with one of the nation's leading employment counsels, this firm called Seyfarth Shaw. This partner there, Pam Devada, she's known as like a legal eagle in the space. And any background screening listeners are going to know exactly who she is. But I was like, what does this product need to look like? What do I need to be aware of? And she got down to like, you can't even have red and green in your application because that's going to
Yeah.
impart an opinion, right? You can't score an individual, for example, because you have to back that up. There's something called the Uniform Guidelines for Employment Selection Procedures. So I became like a employment law kind of nerd, I would say, pretty early, and got an education that like many don't, just who are in this kind of like world of tech that I'm in. But our users, like, they want compliance. Compliance is now a differentiator for Fama, and the core technology that we've developed, anticipated a lot of like the changes that in AI, the EU AI Act, the New York AI Act, the California Privacy Act, a lot of that like right to be forgotten, consent requirements, all of that's better with software. So we made the conscious decision, and it hit the bottom line like pretty early, but I think has paid off in spades as, we don't have to be like, oh yeah, we're compliant, try to figure it out before, the customer signs up. That's just like part of who we are.
Ooh, sounds like the right way to go about it. I mean,
I
I'm
mean,
sure you
and now it does. Monday Morning Quarterback, 11 years later, like the right move, but then
Right.
it's questionable.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned some things like the Credit Reporting Act and certain things that exist. We were just talking about this when we were at an event last month about how companies are getting in trouble for not doing some of the things that you've done, right? Or not being as cautious and careful. So, one of the things that's come up is candidates not being aware of what they're being scored on or
Totally.
what screening is being done. So, I guess my question is, how do you feel about like candidates being made aware of the screening that's happening? Like what does that look like?
About time. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's what we've been saying, right? It's like, this
Yeah.
is one of these things, for this technology to really take off. You have to generate the trust, not just between the employer and the software vendor, between the candidate. And that candidate becomes an employee. that candidate ends up becoming the employee that makes the decision to renew your software or not, right? And so yeah, look, at the end of the day, anytime a third party is involved in a hiring decision, a benefits granting decision, or a credit granting decision between an employer or a corporation and an individual, there have to be controls in place because unfortunately, this has been exploited the wrong way. You could have the very best intentions in the world of saying, oh, no, we don't have to tell the candidate, but trust us. We're going to like do things the right way. Transparency solves all of that, right? Giving a candidate, for example, in our world, a copy of the report, that shows, hey, we saw these things that you posted on TikTok or Instagram that are causing issues for us. Like you get a chance, you get 5-7 business days, depending upon the state, to dispute the results, come back to challenge those results. And the employers have to share that information. They sign up for that when they use our software. They disclose to the candidate that they're using it. And a lot of these like black box AI softwares that are scoring candidates now are putting employers in a position where the candidate says, hey, well, why didn't I get hired? And they can't explain it. And even worse, they never even told them why they were, right? So this, it's funny that I know that we won't, go into the details of the lawsuit that you're referring to, but like this has been around for a
Who
long
shall not be named. Yes.
Yeah, it's not like this is a new thing, anybody who's been around the block knows that, again, these things, they used to call them the guidelines, but there are specific definitions of how employers can use technology to evaluate candidates and data explainability that's associated with that, where consent in the United States is required if you're a consumer reporting agency. And in Europe, consent is one of the bases for processing personal data. So, there are ways that, certainly you could get around that, but is that the right thing to do? I don't think so.
Right. Well, I think one of the words you used in there is so important is transparency. That's another word that we would tattoo on our forehead if we had more space. Our next question here is like, what are companies underestimating about digital behavior risk?
Yeah, I think part of the real challenge on digital behavior risk is like the scope of it and just how prevalent it is today. We often ask, employers when we go and engage with them, whether it's through some of our partners or directly, we're like, look around your office. Like, are people hanging out at happy hour after work? I mean, are they hanging out at the water cooler? It's like not as much, right? You see people who are, again, mostly Gen Z, millennial now. You're seeing Gen Alpha who's now in the workplace. It's the first time in history of 6 generations in the workforce right now. So we're seeing like sea change that's happening across the employers. We largely serve like financial services, I'd say like infrastructure, healthcare organizations, that kind of thing. Big companies is who we tend to work with. And, I think the thing that folks underestimate is how employees and people who work at companies more generally, how they engage with one another, where they live their lives, how they share information, right? Like in a new post-COVID hybrid work environment, you might actually be like connecting with that new hire on TikTok or Discord or LinkedIn before you ever go to happy hour with them, right? I remember like when I got out of college, it was like, yeah, happy hour after work was where the fun stuff happens, so to speak, right? But now that's not the case anymore. People drink less. They don't, alcohol isn't really a part of the game anymore for a lot of the folks that are just entering the workforce. And two, it's just a different way that folks are engaging. So what most, people really miss on digital behavior is like just how pervasive it is and the role that it plays in the average day in the life of the people that work for you. I think that's probably the biggest thing that people are overlooking is just how much the things have changed in the past 6 years or so. You have like this new workforce, hybrid and remote work environments, we're engaging in these digital spaces. And that, train is only going in one direction, that's really getting more significant.
I mean, Victoria and I have talked a lot about how much time these generations, including ours, are on social media each day. Like that is the new community. And it's been such an amazing, interesting shift. I don't know if I mean amazing in a great way or a bad way. I'm not sure, but there's a lot of community there, and there's a lot of behavior there as well.
Yeah, and I think the real forward thinking customers, that we work with are sort of connecting this to like employee engagement in an interesting way as well, of where we're starting to see the ways that we connect with the spaces where our employees are actually hanging out. And not just like saying like, oh, well, now we have lunch on Thursdays, but like, hey, we know you guys are connecting on Twitter and TikTok, whatever. Like, fine, we're not going to stop that. No one's going to be able to slow that down. But if someone joins your company and they're posting these like hateful screeds on TikTok or saying, crazy stuff on LinkedIn about women in the workplace or something like that, like that's a problem. you can't just excuse that. Maybe if it was just like, oh, there's a small portion of our workforce, they're on social media, and now it's everybody. So it's a different story.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to ask too. I think what's interesting, and we've spoken quite a bit about this, is that there is a rise in the community, and we're telling companies meet candidates, meet employees where they're at, and where they're at is on these platforms. And at the same time, I see a huge trend lately for employee generated content, meaning employees are capturing content, either day in my life videos or getting ready for work, or I'm at an event and I'm doing this. And I know when we sat down with you and one of your associates, we heard firsthand some of the examples of where that can go wrong. Best of intentions when you're capturing content, or best of intentions. And we do think true, honest, transparent content like that is very valuable for companies and for their branding. But I guess I'm curious, what are some of the biggest like mistakes, or like not gotcha, but like, you're at the front lines of this, right? So you see the issues that these companies are uncovering when they do screens with you. So I'm just curious, we do have people that listen to us that might make some content, about their job or about their work. What are some things that should be avoided from your lens?
Yeah, well, first, like just taking a step back, when we first met, I thought what you guys are doing, expert interviewers, is like it's so for the moment. Like you're exactly right about the way that people engage, right, and making it fun, making it interesting. Like you guys rack up the views. I've seen the videos myself, right, and like that's a real thing, and that's going again in one direction, right, and so. We actually try to mimic a little bit of what you guys do in in your marketing with some of the stuff that I'm actually shooting some video content later today after this one, because I got my wife who's like my video recorder, and she's like my art director and all that. But I would say like for folks that are out in the field who are making content, you're right. Like this is a way, especially if you're in recruiting or recruiting ops, to like engage with candidates who are like passively cruising through their feed, right? But there are a few things to watch out for. One, I'll just start like industry specific. If you are in healthcare, and you work in a hospital system or a healthcare system, we see a lot of examples of people who are doing a day in the life, or the post-op kind of like a nurse who's talking about a complex case that they had, right? And so we see a lot of employers now in that space in particular who are looking at almost like HIPAA and privacy violations of people who are posting content and talking about, hey, look, like even taking a picture inside a hospital and showing a hospital floor, or giving some sort of connection to the viewer that could expose who was at the hospital, the type of procedure they were working on. Even that sort of stuff can be a problem for your employer. So I just be very careful about where you do this and what you disclose if you work in a highly regulated field. And that can extend to people in financial services. Many folks know this, but like even if you run, let's say you got like an Airbnb on the side that you're renting out, right? And you're working financial services, and you're talking about your, rental property on TikTok or something like that, you can get dinged for that, for outside business activity and posting that on social media, even if it has nothing to do with your work. So I would say the line for people to be aware of is like, on things that you might feel are just part of how you talk about your life and your day to day, be very careful about one, regulations, HIPAA, FINRA, et cetera, on like healthcare and finance respectively. But like, I guess the third thing I would tell you is that the people that are truly problematic, and this is kind of the gotcha, but the people that are truly problematic don't think there's anything wrong with saying something racist or violent or threatening, right? Or talking about recording a video. We have examples of people who post videos of them stealing codeine from their hospital and talking about something on TikTok or Twitter, right? And so there is this level of like, you're not going to know that you're the problem because you're the one who's publicly normalizing stealing from your workplace or saying racist that are public. But the things that that's like a fraction of people.
Yeah.
I would say the things that most people could get caught up on are like exposing private things about your business, confidential information about your business, or looking at your confidentiality agreement, making sure that you're not stepping outside the lines. That's probably the biggest thing I could recommend.
When we first sat down together at HR Tech, I remember I came in a little weary because I was like, listen, we always punch up. Like we're punching up at hiring managers and at companies to do better. And I remember asking you, I'm like, how does this benefit candidates? Like, how does this benefit people? And I don't know if you remember this, but I'll get you started. You started talking about candidates want to work in a safe environment too. And I was like, Yeah, they do. Like that makes so much sense. If I knew that an employer was taking care in who they hired and were bringing on people that matched their employee handbook, it's like there is a sense of alignment and peace that you gave me when you talked through that. I was like, wait a second, that is a benefit. It's not there's just there to screen out people. It's there to get the right people to work together.
Yeah, of course I remember that, and the analogy we often talk about is like companies are a big piece of fabric, a blanket, whatever you want to call it, and each thread plays a role in the composition of that fabric, right? I would just encourage, listeners to consider that, like, yes, this is social media, this is digital identity, this is a new way of thinking about behavior, but the best employers, the places that people want to go work, have created those environments, right? It's why they earn good employment reputations. It's why they get, high CSAT scores from employees. It's why people refer their friends to come work there. It's why those jobs are so hard to get, because those are employers that obsess about evaluating behavior and ensuring that a person's past reflects their future. So this is just a new way of doing that. And yeah, I don't think any of us would have a problem with saying, yeah, we're going to filter for people who are acting intolerant or threatening towards others, or who are talking about being high at work or something like that, right? I
Right.
think when we're at a company, it's like we're all in this together, right? Like we're all rowing in the same direction. And just like you don't want a low performer on your team who's dragging you down while you work your butt off, it's like you don't want somebody who's walking into a meeting saying something misogynistic and shutting up all the women in the room, and making people less productive, less connected to the mission of what's going on. That's like
Yeah.
basic. I'm not talking
Right.
about something that's new. It's just a normal stuff.
Yeah. And all the people that you're screening out, they can all work together too, like they can find their own company where they're a fit.
Yeah, they can work for like a Wile E. Coyote Acme Corporation.
Right.
How it benefits candidates is really going to resonate with people because there's probably some criticism that you might get in your space, right? What's something that you think about that is kind of a fair criticism, I guess, like if you had to pick one?
No, of course. I mean, look, we're by no means a perfect company by any stretch, and we get plenty of. I don't think you're asking about like product feedback, because there's plenty of product feedback of how we can make our solution better. But I think fair criticism is like, how do I take action on this information, right? Like, how do I quantify and determine what's a risk and what's not, to my company, right? A lot of times employers haven't really gone down the path of asking, do we have enforceability in our code of conduct, or have we found a way to actually like add teeth to our code of ethics? And so we kind of operate in this like, so what kind of mindset for certain
Mhm.
employers that we work with. And I think that is a fair criticism, where a lot of background screening, the reality is a lot of background screening today happens because it's regulated, happens
Mhm.
because employers have to do it, right? And
Mhm.
so we often get questions of like, what role is this actually going to play in reducing my turnover rate, or my cost per hire, or my incident rate, right? And the criticism really is like, what's the ROI on a solution like this? Kind of one of the basic pieces of it. But employers who begin to kind of use and understand our solution and pick up on it for what it is, realize that like there is value in avoiding misconduct, because it doesn't show up on a P&L. Like,
Mhm.
you get the lawsuit, you get the HR phone call at 2:30 in the morning, right? Because something went crazy at the employee offsite or the holiday party or something like that, right? And that wasn't because of what they said or did on social media, but the signal could have existed earlier that led to that sign of misconduct. So, I'd say the most frequent criticism we get is like this kind of, so what, like, what is this really doing for me in terms of my hardcore time to fill metrics and my turnover
Yes.
metrics, et cetera, right? And what we kind of counsel is like, this is that kind of unseen part of your organization, where the second and third and fourth order effects of letting somebody into your organization that normalizes misconduct, that somebody sees as an example of, behavior that's okay at that company, leads to dastardly outcomes. And employers who've been burned know that.
Mhm.
And many are coming around to the fact that, this is a proactive stance they should take.
Mhm. That makes a
Yep.
ton of sense. Well, I know we have some rapid fire questions, but was there anything else you had, Lorna?
Other
Um,
than I just love the line misconduct doesn't show up on a P&L because that's just it's gold.
These things that just happen in companies all the time. And I think a lot of folks just chalk it up to the cost of doing business, right? They're like,
Yeah.
well, shit happens. I don't, I can swear on this podcast. Can you swear on
It's
this podcast?
fine.
Yeah, by all means.
Stuff
We're
happens.
adults. We're all adults here.
Stuff happens in a company, and that's just kind of it, right? But I
Yeah.
think the point is like this stuff is avoidable, and there are ways that you can maybe not like preliminarily, predict who's a good or a bad person. That's not possible. We can all use our judgment,
Yeah.
and we can use the pattern of behavior and our pattern recognition that we have around that pattern of behavior to make informed decisions about who we bring in and who we don't. So yeah, this stuff, it's not like, oh, well, the cost of my risk. Some of these HR tech companies are like, well, here's your ROI calculator. Well, this is going to help you do A, B, C, and D, and E better. We kind of exist in this world of like, we're going to make your organization healthier. We're going to make sure that you have fewer risks and issues to deal with, and that you're going to have a happier workforce.
Yeah, that's wonderfully said. And also your HR tech voice sounds a lot like my voice when I imitate my husband. So that's I think it's just common. All right. So rapid fire questions, Victoria.
Rapid fire. Okay. Well, and it sounds very intense. There's just a couple here.
I'm scared. I'm really scared.
No, oh my God.
We promise we're nice. Okay. So rapid fire, give us your quickest off the dome answer to these. One online behavior that's a bigger red flag than most employers realize.
Other drugs. We have cannabis and other drugs in the same, so we have two different categories, right? And so cannabis, I think, is less of an issue. Right. Other drugs, big problem. And employers sometimes look the other way on that. So that's
good to know.
That's a good one.
Makes sense. All right. One myth about digital behavior screening.
That we are deciding what your favorite color is or what your political persuasion is.
Right. Fair.
That we're an AI bot that's telling you who's good and who's bad.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, something that you've changed your mind about since becoming a founder, and you've done it for quite some time, so we know you got something good in there.
Yeah, I would say the biggest one is transparency. I used to, we at Fama do our full board deck with the whole company, like cash, revenue, challenges, highlights. I used to kind of like have this mentality of like, I don't want to scare people away by being too real with them. They didn't sign up to be founders, right? They signed up to be employees of companies. I didn't want them to kind of be concerned about their job. If I'm like, hey, we got, X amount of runway left, and then people start jumping ship. But then I found when you start being transparent with people about what's actually happening in the company, it gives them more job security, right? It gives them more faith and understanding, because people are smart. They can figure it out for themselves. They can make their own decisions. So yeah, I would say the biggest thing I've shifted on is like, I am transparent. And some people who've joined our company in the more recent years have been like, damn, this is like the most transparent company I've ever been at. So that's like my thing. Yeah.
That's lovely to hear. You're literally, it's like music to our ears. Yes.
Transparency.
That's wonderful.
That's true. You can ask people who work here that.
Yeah. Well, we might run into them at some of these events coming up for conference season.
Yeah.
So.
We'll be there, yeah.
Yeah. All right, last one. What's riskier in hiring? Ignoring digital behavior or over-indexing on it?
Ooh. Obviously, I got to say ignoring.
I was going to say. I know.
I got to say.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the bottom line is like, I want like, as a final word, how about just ignoring behavior?
Right.
Strip out digital. Like if you think that behavior of what a person's done and said in the past doesn't matter in the future, then that's the big question. That's the big question you should be asking yourself. Like, digital behavior is analog behavior in 2026. That's a hill I'm going to die on. Absolutely. 100%. Like, it's the same stuff. Same stuff.
Mic drop right there. Mic drop.
Love it so much. So, Ben, where can our listeners find more information about you, about the company? Where are you going to be coming up here soon? Tell us everything.
You can find us on our website at fama.io. You can check us out on LinkedIn. I post there from time to time. I'll be at ERE in May, and we're speaking there. I'll be at HR Tech. We have like a bunch of events that we're going to be at. But yeah, ERE is probably, I think, the biggest one that's coming up, and then HR Tech in the fall. And our marketing team's going to kill. I don't have the full marketing calendar in front of me, but we're doing a lot of stuff. We're going to be in a lot of places, but like, hit us up on the internet.
I was going to say, yeah. They can find you. They can find the information.
Use the internet and find us.
Use the internet for good. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so nice to be able to expand on the conversation that we had and hear more about Fama and all the wonderful things for both sides that it can do. So thank you so much, Ben. It's great chatting with you.
Really,
thank you, Ben.
Really appreciate it, Lauren and Victoria. Talk to you guys soon.
All
All
right.
right.
See you next
Bye.
time. Bye, guys.